The dawn fog wrapped itself around the towering Douglas firs like secrets the forest wasn't ready to give up. In the deep stillness of Cedar Falls, the only sound came from the slow crunch of leaves beneath well-worn hiking boots. Henry Walker moved through the woods with the steady ease of someone who knew every tree and trail by heart. His rough, practiced hands gathered dry kindling from the forest floor, while in his jacket pocket, 6-year-old Lisa's maple leaf drawing bright with crayon reds and oranges softly rustled with each step he took. Before we continue, let us know where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories reach. Then the silence shattered, a cry for help weak, but unmistakably desperate floated up from the rocky ravine 20 feet below. Henry dropped the kindling and hurried to the edge. When he rappelled down the slope, what he found changed everything he thought he knew about power, about wealth, and about the kind of person who ends up broken and alone in the middle of nowhere. She was sitting against moss-covered granite, her designer silk blouse torn and stained with dirt. Her bare feet were bleeding. She clutched a shattered iPhone like a lifeline to a world she could no longer reach. When she looked up at him, her eyes held the commanding presence of someone used to boardroom victories and million-dollar decisions. But beneath that authority, there was something raw and terrified. "Please," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of secrets too heavy to carry alone. "Don't let them find me here." Henry's ranger training kicked in. His hands moved automatically toward the first aid kit strapped to his belt. Her left ankle was swollen, angry purple bruises spreading beneath torn designer stockings that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget. But it wasn't the injury that held him. It was her eyes. Those weren't the eyes of someone who'd just taken a wrong turn on a hiking trail. They were the eyes of someone running from something far more dangerous than getting lost in the Oregon wilderness. "Ma'am, you're hurt," he said gently, using the same tone he used when Lisa woke from nightmares about the mother she barely remembered. "Let me help you up to my cabin. We need to get that ankle looked at." She flinched when he moved closer, her whole body tensing like a cornered animal. "I can't," she breathed, clutching the broken phone tighter. "If they track the GPS, if they find out where I am." Her voice trailed off, but the fear in it was louder than any scream. Her hands trembled as Henry carefully wrapped her ankle with medical tape, her designer rings catching what little sunlight filtered through the canopy above. She moved with a strange contradiction, fragile and commanding at the same time, like someone used to having others handle every detail of her life, yet tough enough to survive a night alone in the wilderness. "What's your name?" Henry asked, keeping his voice steady and non-threatening. She hesitated for what felt like an eternity, her gaze flicking between his face and the steep ravine walls around them. "Amanda." She finally said. Something about the way she said it suggested it wasn't the whole truth. Henry didn't push. In the 18 months since his wife Grace died, he'd learned that some people needed time before they were ready to share their real stories. "Well, Amanda, I'm Henry," he said softly, "and right now, the only thing that matters is getting you somewhere safe and warm." The relief that washed over her face was so profound it almost knocked him backward. The walk back to Henry's cabin took nearly 40 minutes, with Amanda leaning heavily on his shoulder and wincing with each step. She said nothing about the modest ranger station he called home, but he caught her studying the hand-carved wind chimes Grace had made in her final summer, the vegetable garden Lisa helped tend, and the pile of split firewood that represented hours of evening work after his daughter went to bed, when the front door burst open and Lisa ran out in her favorite unicorn pajamas. Henry watched Amanda's entire demeanor shift. The commanding presence softened into something almost vulnerable, as if she'd forgotten what it felt like to see pure, uncomplicated joy on someone's face. "Daddy, is she hurt like Mummy was?" Cliffsay asked with the brutal honesty only 6-year-olds possess. Henry's chest tightened at the innocent question that always found the softest parts of his carefully constructed new normal. "She's hurt differently, sweetheart," he said gently. "But we're going to help her feel better, okay?" Amanda's gratitude was quiet, but absolute, as Henry settled her on the living room couch with Lisa's favorite fuzzy blanket and a cup of coffee, probably the first real thing she'd had in hours. She accepted his offer to stay until her ankle healed with a kind of relief that suggested she truly had nowhere else to go. But it was the way she thanked him that stuck with Henry long after Lisa had chattered herself to sleep that night, not with the polished politeness of someone used to being served, but with genuine surprise-like kindness, with no strings attached, was foreign in her world. "I was supposed to meet my driver today," she said carefully, catching herself before revealing too much, "but I don't think that's going to happen anymore." The way she stared at her broken phone made it clear. Whatever life she'd been living ended the moment she fell into that ravine. Henry found himself wondering what kind of world she came from, where accepting help from a stranger felt like a dangerous gamble. The first few days fell into a strangely natural rhythm. Amanda woke before dawn, silently padding into the kitchen to find Henry already making Lisa's breakfast and packing her lunch for school. Amanda made coffee like a professional barista. Practiced. She never said where she learned it. Lisa, with the easy adaptability of childhood, simply accepted Amanda's presence as if mysterious women recovering from forest accidents were just part of life. "Can you do the funny voices again?" Lisa begged each morning. Amanda obliged, transforming into pirates, princesses, and talking animals with theatrical flair that suggested either natural talent or expensive training. Henry watched these interactions with growing fascination, noticing how Amanda seemed to come alive when Lisa laughed, as if she were remembering some essential part of herself she'd lost somewhere along the way. But it was the small things that intrigued him most, the way Amanda instinctively knew which fork went with which course, how she reached for a phone that no longer worked every few minutes, then froze when she remembered, how carefully she spoke about her past, always vague, always general, never specific. By the end of the first week, Amanda was part of their evening routine. She helped Lisa with homework while Henry cooked, and she somehow possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of environmental science. Lisa's school projects came alive as Amanda talked about carbon footprints, endangered species, and sustainable living. "How do you know so much about saving polar bears?" Lisa asked one night, crayon hovering over melting ice caps. "We start by changing how big companies think, sweetie," Amanda replied, with the intensity of someone who'd spent years thinking about such things. "Sometimes the people in charge don't realize how much damage they're causing until someone shows them another way." From the stove, Henry looked up, struck by the authority in her voice when she talked about corporate responsibility. That wasn't the tone of an outsider, that was the tone of someone who had worked inside the machine. When Amanda caught him staring, she quickly shifted the conversation back to Lisa's homework, but the moment hung between them like an unasked question. The second week brought a comfortable domesticity that surprised them both. Amanda insisted on helping with chores, though it was obvious she was learning most of these skills for the first time. She approached cooking with the careful precision of someone following a complex business plan, measuring ingredients like she was doing lab work, while Henry tried to show her that sometimes the best meals came from instinct. "You don't have to make it perfect," he told her as she fretted over unevenly diced onions. "Lisa and I are pretty easy to please." The way she smiled like easy to please was a revolutionary concept, told him everything about her old life. After Lisa went to bed, Henry and Amanda sat on the porch while she peppered him with questions about forest management, wildlife, conservation, and the logistics of protecting thousands of acres of wilderness with limited resources. Her questions weren't casual, they were focused, strategic, like she was building a map in her head. That's when Henry noticed it. Whenever aircraft flew overhead, Amanda tensed. A commercial jet made her reflexively reach for a phone she no longer had. The distant thrum of helicopter blades made her go completely still, like prey listening for a hunter. She tried to hide it, but Henry had spent years in the wilderness. He recognized what it looked like when someone was being hunted. "Amanda," he asked one night as she flinched at a small plane passing overhead, "what exactly are you running from?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. "The kind of people who don't take no for an answer," she finally said. "The kind who think money can fix any problem and control any person." Henry studied her profile in the porch light, the way her hands clenched when she said control, the bitter edge in her voice when she said money. Wherever she'd come from, it had left scars deeper than a twisted ankle. On the 11th day, everything shattered. Henry was leading a group of forestry students along the eastern section of the preserve when smoke began rising from the valley below. Within minutes, his radio crackled with emergency protocols, a fast-moving wildfire. His training took over coordinating evacuations, calling for backup. The chaos was intense, but it was Amanda's voice that cut through everything. "This is Amanda Hayes," she said into a sleek backup phone he hadn't seen before. Her tone carried the kind of authority that made people snap to attention. I need aerial support at coordinates 44.7 north, 121.9 west. Emergency wildfire suppression. Priority Alpha. Henry felt his blood run cold. Amanda Hayes. The name slammed into his memory like a truck. Amanda Hayes wasn't just any billionaire. She was the CEO of Hayes Global Environmental, the company currently pushing legislation to clear-cut 50,000 acres of Oregon forest for industrial development. The woman eating at his table, playing voices for his daughter, and sleeping under his roof, who was the architect of everything he'd spent his career fighting against. The confrontation came that evening. After the wildfire was contained and the students were safe, Henry stood in his small kitchen, staring at Amanda as if seeing her for the first time. In the living room, Lisa colored quietly, blissfully unaware that her world was about to tilt again. He said, his voice tight with anger he was trying to contain. Amanda Hayes, CEO of the company that wants to turn this entire forest into a logging operation. Amanda's face went pale. She didn't deny it. She straightened instead, the old CEO posture sliding back into place. Yes, she said quietly. That's who I am. Or rather, that's who I was. Henry laughed, but there was no humor in it. So what? He snapped. You just decided to take a little vacation from destroying the environment. Thought you'd slum it with the little people for a few days before heading back to your empire. The hurt that flashed across her face was real, but his anger was fresh, raw, personal. You knew exactly who I am, he continued. You know this forest is my job, my life, my daughter's future. And you've been sitting at my table, playing house with my kid, while your company plans to wipe all of this off the map. Amanda's composure finally cracked. You think I wanted this? She shot back, her voice shaking. You think I chose to inherit a company built on destroying everything beautiful in this world? You think I haven't spent every day for the last 3 years trying to find a way out of the legacy my family forced on me? Tears streamed down her face. Henry realized this was the first time he'd seen her crying, not even that day in the ravine. I came here to disappear, Henry, she said. I was supposed to sign the papers that would clear-cut this forest. Instead, I literally fell off a cliff trying to run away from that meeting. Every morning I've woken up and your house has been borrowed time. A little glimpse of the kind of life I thought I could never have. She gestured helplessly at the small cabin, at Lisa's drawings on the fridge, at the simple life they'd built over 11 borrowed days. Do you have any idea what it's like to realize happiness doesn't require anything you thought mattered? Her words hung in the air like smoke from the morning's fire. Henry felt his anger wobble under the weight of her pain. Before he could answer, the sound of engines broke the quiet. Through the window, he saw them, black SUVs rolling into the driveway, news vans behind them, photographers climbing out with long-lens cameras meant for wildlife. They found me, Amanda whispered, and the fear she'd kept locked behind her. CEO mask for 11 days finally broke free. An older man stepped out of the lead SUV, expensive suit, cold eyes, flanked by private security moving with military precision, even from 50 yards away. Henry could see the family resemblance in the sharp lines of his face, the same commanding presence Amanda carried. Amanda, the man called, his voice slicing through the air. It's time to come home. The board has made their decision about your extended absence. Amanda's hands shook as she turned to Henry. In her eyes, he saw not the CEO, but the terrified woman from the ravine. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never meant for this to happen to you. What followed felt like a nightmare Henry couldn't wake up from. The older man was Charles Amanda's grandfather, and the true power behind Hayes Global Environmental. He came prepared for war. Private investigators presented evidence suggesting Henry had kidnapped Amanda for ransom. Fake communications, doctored financial records, fabricated digital trails showing a desperate single dad exploiting a helpless billionaire. The media narrative wrote itself. Unstable widowed father, behind on bills, living in a remote cabin, takes advantage of a vulnerable rich woman who just wanted to escape. His man, Charles declared to the cameras, has held my granddaughter against her will for nearly 2 weeks. He exploited her vulnerability and manipulated her emotionally for his own financial gain. Henry watched in shock as FBI agents approached the cabin with an arrest warrant. Lisa pressed her face against the window. Too young to understand why her father was being handcuffed, old enough to know their world was falling apart. Within hours, Henry was in a federal holding cell. Lisa was placed in emergency foster care. Amanda was taken away in one of the black SUVs before Henry could say goodbye. Before he could tell her that, despite everything, he understood why she ran. The charges were brutal: kidnapping, extortion, child endangerment. The evidence was so polished, even Henry's court-appointed attorney thought a plea deal might be his only chance. "They have emails from your computer," his lawyer said grimly. "Phone records, financial documents backing their story. It all paints a picture that is very bad for you." "None of this is real," Henry protested. But even as he said it, he knew the truth didn't matter, not against people rich enough to rewrite reality. 3 weeks crawled by. Henry's bail hearing was delayed. Again and again, under vague scheduling conflicts that his lawyer quietly admitted were pressure from powerful people who wanted to make him an example. Lisa's weekly supervised visits were the only light in his darkness. His bright, bubbly girl grew quiet and withdrawn, clutching the crayon maple leaf she'd drawn for him before everything fell apart. "When is Amanda coming back?" she asked during one visit. "I want to show her my new pictures." It broke him every time he had to say he didn't know. Meanwhile, the media devoured their story. Talk shows debated whether Henry was a secret mastermind or just a pathetic, desperate. Manhood snapped. From his cell, Henry watched his reputation, his career, and his future crumble under stories crafted by people who had never met him, but had all the money and power in the world. In the night, everything changed. It was raining, not the usual soft Oregon drizzle. This was a violent downpour, flooding quiet streets and driving everyone indoors. Henry was reading one of Lisa's letters for the 100th time when a guard appeared at his cell door. "You've got a visitor," he said. "Says she has information about your case." Henry's heart pounded as he walked to the visiting room, expecting his lawyer, maybe a reporter. Instead, Amanda sat at the metal table. The designer wardrobe was gone. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a basic ponytail. She looked thinner, tired, but her eyes burned with something new. "I gave up everything," Amanda said, skipping any small talk. Her voice was steady, even if her hands were in control. "Of Hayes Global Environmental, my board seat, my voting shares, it's all gone. I signed it all over to my grandfather in the family trust." Henry stared at her, stunned. "I'm no longer CEO," she continued. "Not an heiress, not a power broker, just another unemployed citizen with a law degree and a very expensive education in environmental science." She slid a thick folder across the table. "The kidnapping charges will be dropped within 24 hours, she said. "I've given sworn testimony, affidavits, and digital evidence proving I came to your cabin voluntarily and stayed of my own free will. My grandfather's investigators have new instructions. The fabricated evidence is being formally Henry felt like the ground had shifted under him. "But that's just the beginning. Henry," she said, her voice growing more intense. "For the past 3 weeks, I've been liquidating every personal asset I could dream. Estate, art, investments, everything I could touch without board approval." She opened the folder. Inside were maps, contracts, deeds. Hayes Global's clear-cutting plan depended on a chain of shell companies buying up small parcels around this forest, she explained. "I bought every single one of them. Quietly then, I transferred them to the Oregon Environmental Trust as conserved land." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "The logging project is dead, permanently." Henry's breath caught, but she wasn't. The last document in the folder was for a new non-profit, the Walker Hayes Environmental Law Center. Henry Walker, Executive Director. Amanda Hayes, Lead Counsel. "I'm not going back to corporate life," Amanda said. "I can't undo all the damage my family's company has done, but I can spend the rest of my life fighting to stop any more of it, if you'll have me as a partner." The visiting room suddenly felt too small. "You gave up billions of dollars," Henry said hoarsely. "Your inheritance, your safety, your family. What happens when the money runs out? When Charles decides you're more trouble than you're worth?" Amanda gave a small, sad, genuine smile. "Then I'll have lived honestly," she said. "For 29 years, I was Amanda Hayes, heir to an empire of environmental destruction, and I hated every minute of it. For 11 days in your cabin, I got to be just Amanda, helping a little girl with her homework, learning to make coffee without an assistant, chopping firewood badly, Those were the best 11 days of my life. She reached across the table and touched his hand. He felt the roughness she'd developed helping with wood and work around the cabin. Small proof she wasn't just talking about change. She'd lived it. I can't promise you wealth or comfort, she said softly, but I can promise you purpose, partnership. And every day I've got left to fight for something that matters. Rebuilding their lives took months. Lisa's return from foster care was joyful and complicated. She needed time, therapy, and patience to process why her father had vanished in handcuffs and then suddenly come back. Henry was reinstated as head ranger, with a promotion and expanded authority over conservation in the Pacific Northwest. Amanda Wood opened their law center in a converted warehouse in downtown Cedar Falls. The partnership was professional at first, built on shared mission instead of romance. Henry sometimes caught himself watching her work late into the nights, rounded by legal briefs and environmental impact reports. With the same intensity she'd once brought to Lisa's bedtime, stories she kept her promise about authenticity. Designer suits were replaced with practical clothes. Corporate boardrooms gave way to community meetings with local farmers, tribes, and small-town residents. Sometimes Henry forgot she'd ever been the woman who once signed off on projects worth billions. 8 months after Monda's testimony, Cliff Henry's name, they won their first massive victory. Hayes Global Environmental weakened by internal war, lawsuits, and Amanda's whistleblower evidence filed for bankruptcy. The company was dissolved by court order. Charles Hayes, facing federal charges for evidence tampering and conspiracy, took a plea deal. Part of it included transferring an additional 12,000 acres of Oregon forest into conservation trust. He called me yesterday, Amanda told Henry, as they reviewed the settlement documents. First time we've spoken since I walked away. What did you tell him? Henry asked. Amanda smiled faintly. That I sleep better now than I have since I was Lisa's age. The Environmental Law Center grew, attracting lawyers from across the country who wanted purpose more than profit. Amanda was a force in the courtroom, her insider. Knowledge combined with real passion turned dry law into powerful stories. About protecting irreplaceable places. Mio, now 7.5, appointed herself the law center's unofficial mascot. After school, she'd show up to help file documents and ask non-stop questions. Is Amanda? She asked one afternoon, carefully stacking papers. When I grow up, can I be a forest lawyer too? Amanda's voice caught. Sweetheart, you can be anything you want, she said. That's the whole reason we're fighting. The end came quietly. On a Tuesday morning in early spring, when the Douglas firs were just starting to show new growth. Henry had noticed Amanda's cough getting worse over winter. She brushed it off. When she finally agreed to see a doctor, the diagnosis came fast and brutal. Advanced lung cancer, almost certainly caused by years of exposure to industrial chemicals at Hayes Global manufacturing sites. How long? Henry asked the oncologist, though Amanda's calm face already held most of the answer. 6 months, maybe 8, with aggressive treatment. Amanda listened to the treatment options with the same focused attention she gave legal cases. But Henry could see in her eyes she'd already decided. She chose quality over quantity. No chemo, no brutal regimen, just time. Time in the forest she had helped save. Time in the cabin she'd once hidden in. Time talking to Lisa about why protecting beautiful things mattered. She worked until her body wouldn't cooperate anymore. Then spent her final weeks at Henry's cabin, listening to the forest sounds that had become the soundtrack of her new life. Lisa, with the strange mix of wisdom and innocence that comes from losing too much too young, became Amanda's helper, eating to her, bringing wildflowers, crawling into bed beside her on bad days. Are you scared? Lisa asked one afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching deer graze in the meadow. Amanda thought for a long moment. Not scared, she said quietly. Just grateful. Grateful I got to know what it feels like to live for something bigger than myself. The funeral was small but full of meaning. Environmental lawyers, forest rangers, tribal elders, people whose lands, jobs, or communities had been protected because of her work stood shoulder-to-shoulder. Lisa insisted on speaking. Wearing her best dress, she walked to the podium with her chin held high. Miss Amanda taught me that love isn't about staying forever, she said, her small voice echoing through the room. It's about what you choose to leave behind. Henry watched his daughter with aching pride, knowing loss had forced her into wisdom far too early. The Walker Hayes Environmental Law Center kept operating with a large endowment Amanda had set up, ensuring her team could help communities fight corporate environmental destruction for decades. Her personal papers, including a brutally honest memoir about her journey from billionaire heir to environmental advocate, were scheduled for posthumous publication, with all proceeds going to forest conservation in the Pacific Northwest. 3 years later, Henry stood at the entrance to Amanda's trail, the hiking path through the Cedar Falls wilderness dedicated in her honor. He watched 9-year-old Lisa lead a group of 4th graders on their first official nature walk. She moved through the forest with the same calm confidence Henry once thought belonged only to him, pointing out tree species and explaining why old-growth forests mattered. The memorial plaque at the trailhead bore a simple inscription: Amanda Hayes, 1994 to 2028. She taught us that love isn't about staying, it's about what you leave behind. Visitors often stopped to read those words, never realizing the woman on that plaque had once controlled a corporation worth billions before choosing a different kind of legacy. Lisa paused her tour guide speech and turned to the plaque. "This lady used to live with my dad and me," she told the other kids. "Madam, she was really rich, but she gave up all her money to save trees. Some people think that was crazy. I think it was brave." One of the older students raised her hand. "If she was so rich," the girl asked, "why did she want to live in the woods instead?" Lisa's answer carried the weight of what she'd seen firsthand, because she learned that being happy doesn't cost anything. She said, "It just means choosing to protect the things you love more than the things you own." Henry felt his throat tighten. The law center had become a regional force, representing indigenous communities, farmers, and grassroots groups against corporations that treated nature like disposable inventory. Former Hayes global logging sites had been replanted with native species. Wildlife was returning to land once marked for destruction. None of it would have existed without one terrified woman choosing to climb down into a ravine 3 years earlier, then choosing authenticity over inheritance. As the kids headed down the trail, arguing over which tree was their favorite, Henry stayed by the plaque a little longer. The forest around him was thriving, protected for generations by legal frameworks Amanda had helped build. Lisa's voice drifted back to him, explaining to her classmates how they'd plant trees at the end of the hike. When he finally followed them back toward the ranger station, the afternoon light filtered golden through the trees, just like it had the first day he found her. "Dad," Lisa ran back to him, slipping her hand into his. Her backpack was stuffed with pine cones and her notebook full of observations for next week's science project. "Do you think Amanda knows about all the trees we've saved since she died?" Henry looked down at his daughter, the little girl who had learned about loss, purpose, and courage before hitting double digits. "I think she lives in every choice we make to protect something beautiful," he said softly. "Every tree we save, every trail we keep open, every person we teach to love this forest the way we do. That's Amanda, still working." Lisa nodded, as if that answer settled something deep in her. They walked home together, evening light turning the forest to gold. The porch light glowed over Grace's old wind chimes, and the vegetable garden Lisa now tended with the same care Amanda once gave legal briefs. Inside, a simple dinner waited, food made with attention and eaten with gratitude. The kind of meal Amanda had come to love during those 11 days that changed everything. After Lisa went to bed, Henry sat in his favorite chair, reviewing new case files from the Walker Hayes Environmental Law Center. Plans were underway to expand protections to even more forests. The work continued, just like Amanda knew it would. In the quiet moments between pages, Henry could still feel her presence, in the choices he made, in the way he raised Lisa, in the deep, stubborn commitment to choose what was right over what was easy. Their story became part of Cedar Falls folklore told by rangers, teachers, tribal councils, law students. People talked about the billionaire who gave up everything to save a forest, and the single father who showed her what real living looked like. But Henry knew the truth was simpler and more complicated. It was about broken people who found healing by serving something bigger than themselves, about a little girl who learned that love means protecting what you treasure most, about choices that echo through generations in ways you never see. Amanda had shown him that heroism doesn't always look like a movie scene. Sometimes it's as quiet as helping a stranger, as risky as telling the truth when it costs you everything, as powerful as turning your back on profit to fight for what cannot be replaced. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you rethink wealth, purpose, or what legacy really means, then like this video to help it reach more people. Comment your Amanda moment, a time you chose what was right over what was easy. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss more powerful, soul-stirring stories. Share this with someone who feels trapped in a life that doesn't match their values. Let's build a community that chooses love over greed, courage over comfort, and legacy over ego. This is Single Dad Nation, where stories aren't just told, they change the way we live.